So good afternoon. I'm Jill Palmer. I'm the Executive Director of the American Red Cross Florida Gulf Coast to Heartland Chapter. Today on World Humanitarian Day, we honor all humanitarians who go to extraordinary lengths to help women, men, children whose lives are upended by crisis. Today's Diversity and Inclusion series, To Life, Equality from Past to Present, is hosted by the Florida Gulf Coast to Heartland Chapter. We welcome you and hope you enjoy today's presentation. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please keep your video cameras turned off so that we can feature our panelists only on video. Please mute your computers and phones. And following the presentation, we will take questions. At this time, I'd like to welcome our host, Marie Grassmeyer, our Diversity and Inclusion Committee Chair.
Thank you, Jill. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Marie Grassmeyer, Diversity and Inclusion Chair for the Florida Gulf Coast to Heartland Chapter. And I want to welcome you again to this event. I'm so happy that you could join us. Our committee is working very closely with the other chapters in our region to bring a message of solidarity and unity, and also to provide education on historical and current topics of interest. So this year we have identified some goals, and that is to be a unifying force to confront racism, injustice, and oppression, to increase the impact of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee and activities, to create a safe space for staff and volunteers to have an open dialogue, to create an accountability plan and set standards for measuring our efforts and our results, and also to share relevant and timely messages of solidarity via emails, newsletters, calls, and social media. So as Jill mentioned earlier, today is World Humanitarian Day. And it's a day that we should be especially proud to be part of the Red Cross, the world's largest humanitarian organization. In today's presentation, To Life and Equality from Past to Present, a discussion on the Red Cross reconnecting families, we will learn about the Swedish Red Cross and its efforts called the White Bus Rescue Mission that actually saved 17,500 women and children from the Ravensbrück camp in Germany during World War II. We have an amazing panel of speakers that my co-host Grace Meinhofer is going to present to you shortly. Grace is the Regional Communications and Marketing Director for the South Florida region of the American Red Cross. So Grace, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Marie. I am going to share with everybody now our agenda for today. We are so happy that you guys are here. We've been waiting to put together this panel. We originally had it scheduled for April, and here we are today. I'm sharing my screen here. This is the agenda and the participants. I will introduce them one by one before the presentation. I would like for, again, since there's a lot of people who just joined us, please keep your cameras and keep your microphones muted if you're not going to be speaking on the presentation. At the end of the presentation, of the entire presentation, we will be taking questions. If you have questions and you would like for us to ask the panelists at the end, you are welcome to put your questions on the chat, and Rebecca Toriani, our Regional Communications Manager, will be taking them, and at the end of the presentation, she will be asking them to the panelists. So again, you're welcome to put your questions. And now we will start our presentation. I would like to introduce Richard Olson. He is the president of Better Futures Foundation. He spearheads the vision and mission of the organization, which was inspired by the largest rescue action during World War II, where 17,500 Holocaust victims were rescued by the Swedish Red Cross White Bus Rescue Mission. Richard's goal with Better Futures is to bring the symbol of the white buses to people of all ages in the United States and to engage and inspire how can we all be ordinary heroes and make an extraordinary difference. And now with you, Richard.
Thank you very much. Let's give me a second here to share my screen. See here, 1 second. Can you tell me if that looks about right to you?
Yes, it's looking good, Richard.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, hi again. Thanks for the beautiful introduction. My name is Richard Olsson. The Swedish Red Cross White Bus Rescue Action was initiated by about 300 Swedish Red Cross volunteers under the leadership of the Vice President of the Swedish Red Cross, Folke Bernadotte. Approximately 15,500 Holocaust victims was rescued during the 54 days in the spring of 1945. And this was the largest rescue action during World War II. The picture you're looking at here is from our exhibit down at Florida Gulf Coast University earlier this year. And you see one of the survivors, Elsie Ragusin, in front of one of the white buses. You will learn more about Elsie in a few more minutes. Today's presentation is just a short version of my full presentation, which I have called How a Jar of Potato Salad Led to the Rescue of 15,500 Holocaust Victims During World War II. And perhaps at a later date, we can get back together and I can share the full presentation for those who are interested. Here you see a map of Europe back in January 1944. It shows some of the major concentration camps, Mauthausen, Dachau, Buchenwald, Neuengamme, and Ravensbrück. It also shows Auschwitz, which was located right here. Again, the time of this rescue action was about a year later. It was in early 1945, and by that time, the front line, which you see over here, 1944, had actually moved to about this area. We know that because Auschwitz was actually liberated on the 27th of January 1945. Sweden was neutral throughout the whole war. You see the southern portion of Norway up here, and you see Denmark in this location. Folke Bernadotte. Folke's uncle was the King of Sweden, Gustav V, and also the president of the Swedish Red Cross. At the end of August 1944, a list of 6,000 names of Scandinavian concentration camp prisoners is submitted to the Swedish Foreign Ministry by the Norwegian legation in Stockholm. November 30th, 1944 will be the first time there is an actual proposal to send the Swedish Red Cross delegation into occupied territory. February 1945, the Swedish foreign minister makes the decision on a rescue expedition by the Red Cross led by Folke Bernadotte. The purpose is to rescue Scandinavian concentration camp prisoners, regardless of religious affiliation, and ideally bring them to Sweden before the end of the war. The Swedish Red Cross worked together with both the Danish and Norwegian government, but since Denmark and Norway was both occupied by the Nazis, the Swedish Red Cross was the official organization behind the rescue action. Sven and Carl were two of the 300 Swedish volunteers, and they got to see firsthand some of the worst atrocities created by mankind, the Holocaust. No one could have prepared them. Based on interviews and diaries published, many of them have shared that they could not see themselves not have done what they did, even though it changed them forever. The rescue action became their life story. In addition to the 300 volunteers, there was 36 white buses together with other vehicles, plus all supply that was needed, such as food, fuel, and food packages to all rescued. On a side note, there is 5 white buses in existence today, and one of them is on display at Malmö Museum in southern Sweden. There's also an exhibit with more details about the rescue action. I want to mention that Sven's wife, Astrid, is actually a member of the white bus section at the Red Cross in Malmö. And a large part of my research is directly from her and her fellow members of this white bus section in Malmö. Let's learn more about Sven and Carl.
In times of difficulty, true heroes emerge. Heroes sacrifice their time and even their personal safety to help others. United by empathy, their legacies are eternal. This is the story of Sven Allard and Carl Carlson. Sven Allard and Carl Carlson were two young adventurous Swedish men who volunteered on a somewhat secret mission. They met in March of 1945 when Folke Bernadotte brought all the volunteers together. In 1943, Sven Allard started working at the Royal Military Anti-Aircraft Corps in Malmö. During his time there, he worked at another military regiment in Hässleholm, about 55 miles northeast from Malmö. At this regiment in 1945, Captain Persson informed Sven about a secret mission into Germany to rescue prisoners. The captain thought Sven would be a good fit for the job. Sven was very interested in getting involved. Sven drove bus number 27 during the whole rescue action, first with Carl and then alone when Carl became a motorcycle driver. After May 1st, 1945, Sven continued his regular work at the Royal Military Anti-Aircraft Corps until December 31st, 1945. Later on, he worked for the Swedish Red Cross and the Swedish section of the international organization Save the Children. At the time when Folke Bernadotte was looking for volunteers, Carl Carlson was unemployed. Carl was eager to help people in need while making a living. He was supposed to drive one of the 36 buses, but after the first rescue, he couldn't stomach the sight of the Holocaust victims. Many of them were malnourished, sick, and covered in bugs. Carl was transferred to the motorcycle crew and led the buses through the nights. Carl didn't share his experience until the 1980s when he talked about it with his children. Through the story of Sven and Carl, we learned that a huge difference could be made when people come together as a team and take action.
As you can see, this bus is not painted white. This picture was taken shortly before the 300 volunteers left Sweden, and in the last minute before they left, the Allied Air Force asked them to paint all the buses white in order for the Air Force to see them and try their best not to bomb them at the very end of the war. As I mentioned before, Folke Bernadotte, he was in charge of this rescue action, and he was actually negotiating with Heinrich Himmler behind Hitler's back. And at their last meeting on April 22nd, 1945, Himmler said, "Take as many as you can," referring to the Holocaust survivors. So this is what Elsie Ragusin saw on the morning of April 24 when she woke up at the Ravensbrück concentration camp. Following is a short interview that was taken by Elsie about her moment of her liberation on April 24, 1945.
Well, I went outside and they told me you have to go online. Everybody's getting ready to go on the transport. So I went, but I was frightened. I said, where are we going? I thought, you know. And then all of a sudden we saw the white buses coming. And we thought, well, then we thought they'd take you to the crematorium, you know. I said, oh my God, now what? So we went, and I thought I'm not going, but then I saw the cross on the bus, and then these people coming out that came to greet us, and I remember them saying, we are Swedes, we are Swedish, but still I just didn't trust anybody. And then they gave cigarettes out. I said, well, what's something new? That never happened before. And I don't smoke anyway. I said, no, but the girls didn't want to take it. They were afraid, and some took it. And then they started giving a little something, a biscuit or something. I was afraid to take it. And they tried to calm us down, and some started to cry because they thought they were going to take us who knows where. And I just, you know, then finally after we calmed down a little bit, they took us to the door, and I sat in the very front, I remember that, the very front seat, and they put a little package on my lap. And each one, as we came in, we sat and they put a package on each one's lap. And we opened a little cookies, a little biscuit or something, And the women just couldn't believe they started eating, but then they were crying and eating and just laughing and crying at the same time. We just couldn't believe it. We were just so emotional, so terrible. It was just an unbelievable feeling. And then I saw the gates open as the buses started going on, and they saw these big gates open, and we were going outside of the camp. And my God, we still couldn't believe it. I said, oh my, where are we going? Where are they taking us? We went on to Denmark. We arrived at Denmark. And that's where we were off the bus, and they were waiting for us. The people there were so wonderful. They waited for us. We came in, they asked us to come in. They had a big, long table set with white tablecloth, food on the table. And we couldn't believe it. I see this table, and they asked us to sit down, and we started to eat. They gave us a little bit of food, and we were so hungry. And we started to eat, and tears were crying and eating, and the people were so wonderful. We went on to the bus again, and then the boat, Swedish boat at the harbor waited for us. And then we went through the lousing or whatever, and we went to a shower. And that's where I went under the shower, and I see this water coming down. I said, oh my God, water, you know? And it was so beautiful. And then from there, they took us to the hospital. And then they examined us, and some had remained there because they were sick. They had typhoid, or some died of tuberculosis. And the rest of us went on. They took us to a factory, and the owner told us to pick a dress, a coat, and underwear, which I didn't have, and shoes. And we thought, what is this going on? Well, you know, I thought, wonderful, I know. We were so happy, we couldn't believe what was going on, finally.
So you have just met Elsie Ragusin, an American-born Roman Catholic from New York, born in 1921 by immigrant parents. During her visit to her grandparents in Italy, Elsie and her father was arrested by the Nazis, who accused them of being American spies. This took place in the summer of 1944. Elsie was taken to Auschwitz, and her father was transferred to Buchenwald, where he died early 1945. Elsie was transferred to Ravensbrück shortly before Auschwitz was liberated on January 27, 1945. This interview was recorded back in 2016 when Elsie was 94 years old, and I'm happy to say that she will soon turn 99, and she's just as active and lively as you just saw her. The former concentration camp prisoners ended up in various locations around southern Sweden. Many choose to return to their home countries shortly after the end of the war. Others remain in Sweden for the rest of their lives. Now let's meet the creator of the Ravensbrück archive, Zygmunt Lakocinski. Zygmunt Lakocinski was a Polish lecturer in 1945 at Lund University in Sweden. He volunteered to assist with the translation of the Polish women when arriving on the white buses into Malmö. He had the insight to understand the value of these women's stories for future generations, and his collection of artifacts and interviews is now known as the Ravensbrück Archive. Thanks to Zygmunt, we have an incredible source of first-hand stories of what the women of Ravensbrück had to endure, and their stories will help the future generations to make sure never again. Next, you will hear a short message to all of us from Ivana, who was held captive in the Ravensbrück prison as a political prisoner for 2 years.
For the young people should learn that they should be more tolerant to each other, that we should be trying to help each other and not to be enemy to each other. I mean, just because somebody is a different nationality or a different religion, that are different race, we should be a human. We should help each other. And this is how I think it's important.
Ivana's message inspired us here at the Better Futures Foundation in the creation of White Bus for Better Futures program to be delivered to schools and ensure that the stories will never be forgotten. I'd like to thank all of you for attending this short version of my presentation. And I'd like to thank Jill Palmer and her staff at the American Red Cross South Florida region for making this all possible. And on to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. We really appreciate you sharing the story. I want to make everybody aware, Rebecca put a link on the chat where you will find information about the speakers and a link to their websites so you can learn more and find more information. And now I would like to introduce two amazing women. If Melissa and Bailey can come on screen. I have to say that back in March 15, Jill Palmer and I were invited to the Florida Gulf Coast University at the Bradshaw Library to have a private showing of their exhibit to life, the Ravensbrück Liberation. And we were moved by what we saw there, and that's why we decided to have them at one of our diversity, equity, and inclusion presentations. So I would like to introduce Melissa Mein-Vanderberg. She is the head of archives, special collections, and digital initiatives at the Florida Gulf Coast University. Throughout her 16 years in academic libraries, Melissa has sought to integrate the work of archives, special collections, museums, and digital services in an effort to share human experience. She has succeeded in building a department with a unified mission to collect and preserve both the material, cultural, and oral history of the region. Melissa's passion for cultural heritage and storytelling drives her desire to push special collections and rare books out of the vault and make them globally accessible to broader audiences throughout the exhibition and digital repositories. And Ms. Bailey Rogers. Bailey is the archives specialist at the Florida Gulf Coast University Bradshaw Library. She holds a bachelor's in anthropology with a focus in archaeology, cultural history, and social justice. Bailey's passion for cultural history and heritage is evident through her work in curating exhibitions for students and the broader community to view and interact with. She believes that exhibitions are a tool for communities to utilize a way to start conversations about the broader issues with society. And now I leave you with these two amazing ladies who are going to present today.
Thank you so much, Grace. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I am going to turn off my video only so that I take up less bandwidth. How do I make this go away? Can everyone see that okay? Uh-oh. Hold on. Technical difficulties. I do not know how to make this go away. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Curators and exhibition designers are storytellers. The story of our spring 2020 exhibit, To Life, The Liberation of Ravensbrück, is a fascinating one. It's full of heroines and heroes, evil monsters, and the stories and the survivors who lived to tell the tale. Ultimately, To Life is the story of hope, compassion, and the perseverance of the human spirit. Jill and the Red Cross have asked that we share the story of how To Life came to be. And of course, it's not working. Stand by. It's going to be tricky. Okay. We've been brainstorming about an exhibit to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the liberation, but didn't want to focus on the horrors of the camps, nor were we willing to talk about the Nazis in any of our spaces. When I read Martha Hall Kelly's brilliant novel, Lilac Girls, in January 2019, I had never heard of Ravensbrück. I did not know that there was a concentration camp solely for women. I was fascinated, and the idea was seeded. And if you have not read Lilac Girls, you should. Why? Okay. I'm having all sorts of technical difficulties. I am so sorry. Okay. It is through our initial partnerships with the Center of Holocaust and Genocide Research here at FGCU and with Richard at the Better Futures Foundation that the story we needed to share was solidified. The list of people who contributed, inspired us, and helped us along the way would continue to grow over the next 6 months. As the Red Cross knows better than most, connection and relationships are critical. In fact, it was Richard who helped facilitate many of the critical puzzle pieces, including introducing us to the work of documentary filmmaker Magnus Gerten, whose 2015 documentary, Every Face Has a Name, became one of the central features of the exhibition. The film and the exhibition were inspired by a rare and long-lost piece of news footage documenting the arrival of the ferries, carrying thousands of Nazi concentration camp survivors to the safety of Malmö Harbor on April 28, 1945. The ferries held some of the last who were liberated by the Swedish Red Cross, many of whom were the women and children of Ravensbrück. The footage was largely forgotten for 70 years until Gerten discovered it and sought to identify the survivors. His film, Every Face Has a Name, documents the survivors as they see the footage for the first time and share their memories of the day that, quote, life began again. We were fortunate to spend time with Magnus while doing research in Malmö, and he reminded us, as the Red Cross, of course, is keenly aware, these moments and scenes are taking place all over the world today. Endless streams of war survivors arriving to the new country, all anonymous. They are faces without names. So let me introduce you to some of these beautiful faces. Judith Popinski, Etta Caro, Maza Stern, Loka Kalel, and Mala Landsberg worked in a laundry together while trapped in the Lodz ghetto. The 5 Jewish families were transported to Auschwitz in August 1944. Their families were killed in Auschwitz. The young women were left with only each other. Miraculously, the friends would remain together through their imprisonment in 2 more camps, first Sachsenhausen and then Ravensbrück. After being liberated from Ravensbrück, the friends would find freedom together in Malmö on that special date, April 28, 1945. Judith would marry Abram Popinski, a friend from the ghetto. They lived together in Malmö for 64 years. She passed away in 2018 at the age of 95. Fredzia Marmer, the child on the left holding the blanket, was born in Lodz, Poland in 1935. She and her mother, Ligia, to the right of Fredzia, was deported directly to Ravensbrück from the ghetto. Young Fredzia was forced to work at the Siemens factory adjacent to the camp until she caught scarlet fever. Each day, her mother walked to the infirmary. She worried that her daughter would be, quote unquote, disposed of, like most of the ill prisoners. Fredzia survived the fever, and mother and daughter were liberated by the Swedish Red Cross in 1945. Fredzia and her mother were reunited with her father and remained in Sweden for many years. Today, Fredzia and her husband, Rabbi Marmer, live in Israel. A special story is that on the night of the opening reception that we had for To Life, a woman approached us and said that she knew Fredzia personally. Fredzia's husband had been the woman's rabbi. What are the odds? I asked the students and staff to research 1 or 2 women. I wanted them to understand these women. I wanted them to know them in some way. How else could we truly share these stories? Richard introduced us to the archival collections at Lund University, the Ravensbrück archive. Seeing the survivors' personal effects, the transport logs that listed thousands and thousands of names, small makeshift toys that mothers made for their children, and reading their written accounts after the liberation, I knew we had to get there. In this image is young Elsie on the day that she arrived in Malmö Harbor. Elsie would become a central figurehead for us. When we were doing the design work, we always asked ourselves 2 questions when making curatorial decisions. 1, could our decision cause harm? And 2, would Elsie and the survivors of Ravensbrück be proud of our decisions. In August of last year, we secured the funding. All of us would travel to Berlin, and then the 90 kilometers north to Ravensbrück. And finally, we would follow in the survivors' footsteps all the way to the harbor in Malmö, Sweden. Richard joined us for the trip. Our partners in the venture continued to grow. The archive at Lund and Malmö Museum agreed to lend us some of the artifacts from the women and children. It would be the first time that the artifacts would be exhibited in the United States. Bailey, would you go ahead and share about the research trip?
Of course. Thank you so much, Melissa. So in October 2019, our team traveled first to Germany, where we would visit Berlin and Ravensbrück. The group of graduate and undergraduate students included myself, Kinsey Brown, Jordan Curtis, Adrian Sanchez, and Abigail Winslow. The experience of this whole trip was, as cliche as it sounds, completely life-changing. We first arrived to Berlin and spent a day walking around the city and visiting memorials and landmarks. The picture on the left is our group at Checkpoint Charlie, and the right is the memorial to murdered Jews with the Reichstag in the background. From there, we visited Ravensbrück. The concentration camp, which is now a memorial, is located in a small town called Fürstenberg. This was the hardest day for the trip for most, if not all of us. Arriving to Ravensbrück was a very odd experience, and I say odd because it was a really beautiful area. The camp was on a lake that faced the town across the way, and we were there when it was fall, so the leaves were all these really pretty oranges and reds. It felt wrong to think that this place was so beautiful when so many horrific tragedies and atrocities had taken place. After our time in Berlin, we traveled by ferry, just as the women did, across to Sweden. Before going to Malmö, we went to Lund to visit Lund University's archives and special collections. I have to admit, Lund was my favorite part of the trip because, look at this picture. It's such a beautiful town with some of the most kindest people I've had the honor of meeting. The picture in the slide is the library where the archives and special collections is located at. I remember first approaching the building and thinking, is this the Swedish version of Hogwarts? Once we entered the library, we were led to the reading room to meet with the archives and special collections staff. So once we were settled in the reading room, we met with the staff and talked with them about what we wanted our exhibition to focus on. They were really impressed with our emphasis on giving the women and children back their identities and making it personal. After talking and discussing loan agreements, the items that we picked out before arriving to Lund were brought out for us to look at. After having looked at all these items on a computer screen for months, it was really incredible to see these artifacts in person. All of these personal materials have been witness to tragedies, but their meaning to the women who had secretly made these objects represented so much more than the horrors of Ravensbrück. These items represented hope to whomever their previous owners had been. It was really important for us to convey the humanistic aspect of these items and what they represented to visitors of the exhibition. One of the artifacts that stuck out to me wasn't so much a personal item, but it was a picture of a woman. This is Joanna Sedlowska. She was one of the women that was subjected to the medical experiments while imprisoned at Ravensbrück. These women who were experimented on were called rabbits. During my research, I was so personally drawn to her because her face is so striking in the picture seen here. This picture was taken when she arrived to Ravensbrück before they had shaved her head. Before she was brought to the camp, she had been arrested in the Warsaw Ghetto for underground activity. While being transported, Joanna was able to hide a camera and take it with her to the camp. With the secret camera, she took clandestine photos of her fellow inmates' mutilated legs in an attempt to document the camp's horrors. The photos were used in trials that the Human Rights Division of the United Nations conducted. Joanna and some of the other victims of the experiments also testified their experiences at these trials. If Joanna had been caught with the camera, there's really no question that the guards would have executed her. So Joanna's bravery and courage really spoke to me. The risk she took to bring forward the truth was something that I wanted to share with people who interacted with our exhibition. I figured that if she inspired me, then she would hopefully inspire someone else. After our time in Lund, we packed our bags and took a train to Malmö. After dinner, we decided to explore Malmö. We stumbled upon Malmö Castle, seeing a large glass window, and realized that this beaming light in the dark was one of the last 3 remaining white buses. We ran up and pressed our faces up against the glass to look at the white bus, which had become a symbol of hope and compassion to us. The next day, we went to Malmö Castle to meet the curator and the staff to look at their white bus exhibition and to see where the women stayed during their recovery. At one point, we did get to go into the white bus, which was a really amazing experience. And then after that, they led us up the stairs of the castle and then had us turn around. When we did, all of us, and I'm not exaggerating, all of us gasped. The picture on the opposite side of the wall was a picture of the survivors entering Malmö Castle. Usually following their footsteps was just a metaphor, but in our case, we literally followed their footsteps. Our hotel was right across the street from the harbor where the women and children were brought to freedom. On our final day in Malmö, we took a moment to walk across the street and reflect on our experiences. During my reflection, it became clear how vital it is that we continue to share the women's stories. My generation is the last to hear firsthand accounts of the Holocaust. It is now our jobs to help continue to tell these stories and educate future generations. Let us share some of the physical exhibition with you guys.
So one of the things that's really great about this exhibit is that the items that we are exhibiting, they're in America for the first time. In this exhibit, we focus on hope and compassion. That's why we focus on the rescue mission and the people who volunteered and gave their time, and in many cases gave their lives to save these women and save these children.
This map, it shows how much work went into this rescue. It was not something that happened overnight. There was a lot that went into it, a lot of people that were involved, and the people that were involved were volunteers. There were over 15,500 people who were rescued in this operation, and it's something that, you know, not many people have heard about, particularly in the United States. So when you walk in, it's made to feel like you're walking into the concentration camp itself. This is why we built this wall that has the barbed wire on top. And a piece that we showcase on this wall is the identification poster. It's really the only thing in our exhibit that we give to that the Nazis had. The only thing that represents kind of the way that they took these women's identity. And identity is a big part for our show because we want to give back the women their names and their stories. And tell what happened after they were liberated.
Part of our installation of the wall itself, we wanted to make sure that we do have this corner of hope, you know, afterwards, after what happened. And so over here, you'll see the panels start to disappear. And so that's why we have the steps over here. And so this is just that transition into the day that they were rescued.
We know that this uniform was worn by a prisoner, later refugee, named Apollonia Bryska. Apollonia was a Polish political prisoner. We can actually tell that by the patch that is on her shoulder. It's a red triangle with a P on the inside. The red of the patch indicates that she was a political prisoner. The P indicates that she was of Polish nationality. Apollonia was actually confined to the infirmary when she heard that the buses were coming to Ravensbrück. Apollonia jumped out a window and got herself to that bus and got on and was liberated to Malmö as a result of that. Passenger lists were taken in Malmö when the refugees were coming ashore. The disorganization of the camps was pretty rampant at that point. They really didn't have any knowledge of who was coming out of them, let alone where they came from and where they needed to go back to. We know that these particular lists were taken on April 28, 1945. So because of that, we're actually able to identify the women and the people that are present in this room, their stories and their artifacts. We're able to find their names in the lists. Apollonia's name is also circled over on the wall right here behind her dress.
So as Melissa mentioned earlier, Elsie became a central figure that all of us loved. We invited her to come to our private opening of the exhibition. We watched her walk around the exhibition, and then when she saw her items, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. If we hadn't researched a specific person before our trip, I really don't think that this exhibition would have had the same impact. One of Elsie's items that we had on display was this Red Cross letter. In it was the first correspondence that Elsie had received from her mother in 4 years. It is an example of countless letters that the Red Cross sent out in an attempt to bring families that had been torn apart by the war back together. Without the work of the Red Cross and the countless volunteers who risked their lives, this rescue mission would not have been possible.
Thank you, Bailey. Throughout the run of the show, we had many wonderful opportunities to hear from families of survivors. These stories were a gift. One gentleman reached out and shared his mother's story of survival. His mother was small but mighty. Goethe was clearly courageous. She actually hit a Nazi on the back of the head in an effort to try and escape. Her son Richard expressed what a wonderful life his mother had led after being rescued. We were able to find Goethe's name on the transport logs from the day the Red Cross delivered her safely to Malmo. Her name is one of many, 15,500 on the wall. Sadly, due to COVID-19, we made the heartbreaking decision to close the exhibit to the public on March 13, 2020. In the 2 months the show was open, we had over 2,000 visitors. In the weeks that followed, we built out the exhibition digitally, and you can visit it here, ftcu.edu/to-life-exhibit. Our current exhibition, Fight for the Ballot, Voting Rights in the 20th Century, will run from now all the way through May, and you can also see that here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Bailey. We really appreciate this presentation. And now we are going to have our very own Jamie Cruz. Jamie is the International Services Specialist for the American Red Cross South Florida region. He serves as a program coordinator for the Restoring Family Links program from the International Committee of Red Cross. Before being with the Red Cross, Jamie served in the United States Navy for the 6th Fleet and NATO, stationed in Gaeta and Sicily, Italy. He participated in various humanitarian relief missions, being the Kosovo liberation conflict the most impactful, where he witnessed how the Red Cross efforts contributed to the relief of human suffering. And now with you, Jamie.
Thank you, Grace. I wanted to start my presentation with what you just said. To prevent and alleviate human suffering. Restoring Family Links, it's a program that not a lot of people know about and not a lot of Red Crossers know about. It's part of an international effort founded by the ICRC, which is the International Committee of the Red Cross, located in Geneva, Switzerland. And it's been a wonderful program ever since its birth in 1863. So what we do, Restoring Family Links, it's a program that offers 4 services. And it is very much a passion more than a job, because it links and it touches feelings of people that are going through a lot of suffering. We just witnessed all the stories that all the survivors from the Holocaust and Ravensbrück went through, and the fingerprints of Restoring Family Links, it's present in all the volunteer efforts, made the difference to connect all these families after many years of captivity. Restoring Family Links traces people from one country to another affected by catastrophe, war, or any other internal event. We also send Red Cross messages around the world. Hey, I am alive, and I'm in the other part of the world. Small message like that can make a difference in somebody else's life. It can alleviate the suffering of a mother that has been waiting for her son just to see and to hear his voice, or to make sure that he's still alive. And the Red Cross and the volunteers make it possible. Attestation. We go to jails and detention centers around the world to make sure that human rights are in place, and to make sure that people that have been detained are treated humanely. In wellness check, there are some times that we lose touch with our loved ones. We know where they are, but we do not know how they are. We lost communication. The American Red Cross, it's there to serve as a wellness check provider, just to make sure and relay a message that everybody is okay. So how we find a missing relative? The American Red Cross has presence in almost all the countries in the world, 192 to be exact. The inquirer contacts the local Red Cross in their country, provides as much information on the relative or a member of the family that he or she is looking for. The message is sent to the destination country that this person believes his family member has lost touch. Then the local society initiates the search. The results are reported back through the International Committee of the Red Cross, many times with good news locating the person, and some other times reaching a dead end after many attempts and many ways to locate and find someone. At the end, the American Red Cross, in conjunction with the Federation and the Committee of the Red Cross, make the reunification possible. At glance, our program in 2019 assisted more than 17,000 people. We were able to handle 7,800 cases around the world. 8,200 families were reunited. Almost 8,000 phone calls were provided, bringing relief to that anxiety of not knowing where your loved one is. And the global presence gives us a unique network to communicate to other countries where it's devastated by war, by disaster, or by any other internal conflict. The American Red Cross can make that possible. Last but not least, the waiting room. This is one of my favorites. The waiting room is something that we have identified that occurs when a loved one goes missing. Everything gets interrupted for that family member or for various family members, and they are placed in a waiting room. The following video will show us how that waiting room relates to that suffering and how the Red Cross can alleviate it.
Every day, thousands of people around the world go missing. whether in an armed conflict, migration, or a natural disaster. No matter the reason, one thing is true in every case. The missing person's family suffers immensely, not just emotionally, but physically, financially, and socially. Until they know the status of their loved one, their lives are put on hold, stuck in the waiting, in the worrying about where their loved one is, if they're alive, and if they'll ever return. As time passes, the struggles are only amplified. The emotional toll alone can be crippling and create tension in other relationships. A mom can't be there for her child in the ways she wants. A child doesn't always get the affection they need, and family conflicts are likely to arise about how to handle the situation. The financial strain put on the family is also incredibly stressful. Oftentimes, it's the breadwinner of the family who goes missing. When that happens, the family struggles to stay afloat. So much of their waking moments are spent searching for their missing loved one. Even if they don't seem to be getting any closer to finding them, they never stop thinking about them. So many aspects of their lives become more complicated. In many countries, closing a bank account or collecting an inheritance can't be done without verifying the missing person's whereabouts. Sometimes the family's physical safety is compromised. Even if it's only perceived danger, the vulnerability felt without their missing loved one is real and can be terrifying. Socially, they struggle too. Many people around them don't understand what they're going through, and after enough time, start to believe they should just move on with their lives, as though their loved one isn't returning. Time passes, life moves on for everyone around them, but they're stuck. Over time, they might suffer other losses that amplify the situation. This can result in even more vulnerability for the family, especially if they're in a war-torn country. The stress is multifaceted. The pain is ever-present. The struggle intensifies as time goes on. No matter the reason someone goes missing, the families back home have a right to know their fate, and they deserve assistance while they wait. This is precisely why the International Committee of the Red Cross has devoted itself to creating programs and services to help these families in need. Visit icrc.org to learn more and get involved.
That is my contact, my address, my phone number if you ever need more information about it. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Grace.
Thank you, Jamie. We really appreciate you bringing this information and how we close the loop with the Red Cross and how we connect families. At this time, we have the panel open for any questions. If the panelists could just please turn on your camera so you can come up, I would appreciate that. If any of the people who are present today have any questions, if you could please either raise your hand or open your mic, please let us know. And while we do that, Rebecca is gonna again put a link on the chat, and on that link, you will find information of all the panelists. You will have a link to the exhibit and also a link to Better Futures, so you can learn more. Thank you, Rebecca. So you can learn more about all of these initiatives. I see Jose coming up. Jose?
Hi. Hi, guys. Richard, Bailey, Melissa, Jamie, obviously Jamie, who's part of our wonderful region. Thank you so much. And, you know, just looking at the chat, and I'm going to start with Richard. There are no words. I mean, just listening to Elsie's remarks, I was in tears. I'll probably start crying again. And it was heart-wrenching. I mean, I remember studying in school about the Holocaust and not hearing about any of this, of what the three of you mentioned. And it's just strange. It just makes me think, where we are going with history books today, and without going down that rabbit hole, but, just the understanding of the atrocities that occurred. And only hearing of those that were, you know, entrenched and that were at the forefront, like Elie Wiesel or Anne Frank, you know, and not hearing these stories were, this is tremendous, tremendous. And I'm really saddened that you know, I should have dug deeper and looked at more historical artifacts. And this is great that you brought this to the forefront. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and be a little selfish if I didn't mention how amazing it was and how we can still relate today with the beacons of hope when you see the Red Cross on the side of a bus or a side of any vehicle, and to hear Elsie's remarks, you know, about the uncertainties of what this bus was, but then she saw a cross and wondered, what is this about? And can still relate today with some communities, and not even that are going through these, that went through the atrocities that she did. Can't compare that, but the fact that I can still compare somebody looking at the Red Cross and thinking, huh, that's a sign of hope, you know. And I died when she mentioned the pack of cookies, you know, and thinking, oh my God, this is amazing how people react. And after going through so much suffering, and a little sign like that was just, I just remember my first experience of providing a comfort kit with hygiene items to somebody who just lost their child in a house fire, and thinking, this is crap. I can't believe I'm supposed to offer comfort with a bag of hygiene items. And this is what that person focused on, as opposed to everything that was going on around them at the time. So just brought everything to light. It really, really does. And I can't appreciate and can thank you enough for bringing that story yet again to our forefront of thought process within this time period of our lives, and thinking about what we're going through. So hope and compassion still lead the way. And I appreciate that. So thank you all for doing this. And Jamie, obviously, you know, you're one of my heroes here in South Florida. So, but I see you all the time. So thank you all for doing this for us. I really, really appreciate it. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. I've also put on the chat the link to the book Lilac Girls. I think this book was inspiration not only for Bailey and Melissa, but for Jill and myself, where I really learned about the Ravensbrück concentration camp. So I just put the link there on the chat. Any comments, any questions before we close? Great. Well, I want to thank all the panelists for participating today and sharing the information with us at the Red Cross. Jill, if you want to say goodbye to the team.
Thank you, Grace, for being an excellent moderator. To our panelists, I am just indebted to you for your time, your devotion, for making this happen. We wanted to bring this to our area months ago, and I'm so glad we were able to do it. So for a final closing, I'm going to hand it back over to Marie Grassmeyer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. And wow, thank you so much, Richard, Jamie, Melissa, Bailey. I actually had the opportunity also to see the exhibit at FGCU, and it's just amazing. And seeing the artifacts made it so real. It made the women and children come to life, and you could really experience, you know, not experience what they had, but you could really understand what they went through, and you guys made that happen. So thank you so much. And if anyone is wondering what my accent is, it's a Swedish accent, actually. I know I have a very German last name. I look very Asian, but I did grow up in Sweden. I lived there for 18 years, and I do speak Swedish. My mom volunteers for the Swedish Red Cross at the hospital in our town. Well, she did before COVID-19, but she's a Red Crosser as well. So this is a really touching story for me. If anyone has questions, follow-up questions, please feel free to email Jill or Grace. You can contact me. We'll get in touch with the other panelists. If you have any suggestions for upcoming events, please also feel free to reach out. And if you want to join our committee, let us know. We would love to have you. So with that, thank you again to everyone who attended. Have a wonderful afternoon and stay well and safe.